So which Games Workshop games are going to 0?
None of them?
Oh, that's pretty good.
Well, we said 0. This one could go low, though.
That's true. That's true.
Pretty low.
Hey guys, welcome to another Lords of War Games and Hobbies video. I'm Chris, this is Jay.
What's up?
And we're going to talk about, it's a little generic today. We're going to sort of do almost like a market update. Maybe we'll do these once in a while. Market update, they're fun to do. Just to kind of talk about, not just the economics, but like the state of the games, how people feel about them, how many people are playing them, how are they selling, and of course, like all of our videos, it comes from a small, cut little piece of the world, our own view, our own little world here. So take it with a grain of salt, right? Of course, we do talk to a lot of other hobby shop owners and Games Workshop employees, just from connections, industry people. But still the world is massive, and there's thousands and thousands of hobby stores. So take it with a grain of salt.
And every area is different, and there's going to be commenters. You guys are going to be like, oh, where I live, we play all this black powder or whatever. And
the store I go to, they only play Underworlds, and there's 100 players there a week. And I'm like, I don't believe you, but that's okay. Yeah, cool, man.
Even if you showed me the video, I would still be like, that's fake. It's
this is AI.
AI generated.
It's AI. Those are AI players.
Yeah.
So let's start, rip off the top with the obvious gargantuan man.
We're asking how 40K is doing? Is that what we're asking? Hey, 40K
is doing good.
He's good. He's healthy.
Yeah.
40K is very good. Very healthy.
When is he not, though?
Well,
That's really
there's
the
always
question.
there's always every late edition. There's like some moments where they're a bit of a bloated mess.
If you had to paint a picture of what, like, as a humanoid figure, what would you say the 40K looks like right now? Because, like,
oh wow,
I feel like
kind of like a pro athlete at the top of their game.
Yeah, pretty much, right? Like,
for being super Canadian, I guess it would be like the McDavid. And then I don't know what would be an American term. There would be like
some football player,
like a Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, Mahomes. Yeah.
All they do is win. Yeah.
It's kind of amazing, like seeing like 10th edition, like for almost it's been like 8 months or whatever. And then comparing it to other games and stuff like that, it's interesting to see it kind of settle into its own, and then how after even a few army books that have come out, codexes, they've managed to keep it simple. Yeah. Which I think is a real good thing.
This was the home centerpiece of this edition. I think that was their slogan, right? It was like simple but not, I don't know what it was supposed to be, simple but not complicated or whatever.
Yeah.
Or no, it was supposed to be like simple but still had like stuff, because they didn't want to give off the impression that it was like, oh, like it's so simple, it's just for kids or whatever. They wanted to be like, no, the veterans will still enjoy it. No, it's true. The rule set is very good. I was anecdotally talking about playing a game recently, and Chris and I don't play that much. Like we get a game here and there every month, and you have to choose. Most of the time, because we our friends and I we play a lot of Age of Sigmar. So anyway, so I played 40K for the first time in a few months. And I was commenting on how quickly and easily I could slide back into this game. I literally that day or 10 minutes before, I quickly jotted up a list and started playing, and was able to like reference and quickly. There was keywords. I think there was a sequence I had, like I was playing my Eldar army. I have an avatar, and he's like throwing his sword, and I quickly they had something called sustain hits, and I was able to like tap that. I already had an idea of what it meant. It probably meant on a 6 something would happen, and I was right, because I'm like so used to the Games Workshop ecosystem that like you can kind of like when things say like critical wound or sustain hit, you can kind of know like this probably means something's triggering on a certain number.
Right.
And it was very clean and smooth. I was able to play through the game, and I lost because of lack of experience in putting my units in bad places. But actually, the operation of playing the game is very easy. And I think they really did well, and that's probably one of their best written editions in that sense.
And I think like when we're going to transition at some point in the next couple of minutes into talking about AOS, I think that's a great contrast now between like what you just said, and so we'll get to that in a bit.
Exactly.
So like gameplay wise, it's being played a ton in our local community. There's leagues everywhere. We have our own leagues here. It's still obviously the number one game that's played, pickup games, all that sort of thing. Sales wise, I'd say it's no different than normal.
It's trending the way it usually does.
People are collecting armies. They're buying stuff for it,
and I don't know where we're at in there. I would say in the last edition or two, it's been a lot of like redos, some and sprinkle of new things. I guess. I didn't expect Votan to come out So that was probably the last really new out of left field thing. But generally speaking, it's just really solid.
World Eaters were cool, but that was kind of a more expected
Yeah,
thing, right? Yeah,
and that's not like a new.
No.
That's kind of like a
big redo,
revision. So the revisions have done well. Like anytime they've redone something and modernized it, people have enjoyed it and it's sold well. So just keep doing what it's doing. It's not going anywhere. It's probably getting bigger. I mean, I can only imagine the media presence and the video games only help. So it's always been a juggernaut and it continues to be one. So nothing really to really add to that. Yeah. So
transitioning into Games Workshop's second biggest franchise, the Age of Sigmar, I would say it's not as glorious as it has been in its past in some points.
No, it's definitely now. Before all the old world people are like aha or whatever. Yeah. I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think you guys should be just really thrilled that you're even at the game or whatever.
Oh man, just glad to be here.
Glad to be here, guys. Because none of us expected that. But anyway, we'll talk about that too, actually. But the Age of Sigmar, I would say its early couple editions did really well. And I don't know.
There's also like linear, like this sort of like steady, like constant growth in the game.
I think
you could see
it's hit its awkward teenagers, if I had to describe it. It's kind of like it asks more questions than it answers. Learning the game is a challenge. If you like solving puzzles, there's a lot to solve there. And obviously we still enjoy playing it. And this is not to say that it's like this horrible game. It's still a fun, great game, but compared to 40K, it definitely feels awkward.
I feel like they've really shut the tap off on getting new people into it with some of the decisions they've made.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, like you said,
that's a good way to put it.
I think the game has retained people pretty well because it does offer veteran hobbyists a lot of meat on the bone. So if you're the type of person that loves to play games regularly, it's very rewarding because there's a ton of depth to it. A lot of balance. The armies are all interesting and fantastic to collect.
The balance is great.
I think that's pretty remarkable what they've done. However, this is always the catch-22, I think, of these sort of like conversations where like the more kind of not interesting you make the game, but the more depth you add to a game, the more complexity you add to a game, the more difficulty you get with like bringing some like fresh faces and new people into it, right? So I think that's kind of where they're at. They're at this kind of like weird turning point right now where they can kind of maintain course and see if that's what's actually happening, or they can kind of recalibrate and say, okay, we did this with 40K and it didn't work too well. Let's learn those lessons and kind of like simplify where we can again. Right?
Yeah, I mean, so 40K has gotten, well, it was like what, 8th was like, I don't know, would you say 8th 40K was simpler than 7th? Probably. Yes, it was.
It was.
And then 9th got like bloated and complicated. And people got kind of like, they were like, eh. And then 10th, it was like really solid. So
they went even simpler than their...
They did. They did actually.
More universalization.
And then the other
stuff,
corroborating evidence is like early AOS was a lot simpler to jump in and play. And I think something to add a little more nuance, it's not so much that the game mechanics are difficult.
Yeah.
It's the scenarios, the objectives, the hero phase stuff, the
monster attacks,
it's just some of these like extra sub phases,
seasonal,
and then the seasonal
rules,
add-ons. So it's kind of like there's just a lot to track. You have to like, and then of course you have to throw in the wrench of the turn sequence changing. And that mechanic, I think, will stay in the game because it's like what makes it really special or unique. But what the problem with it is you can't talk out a game of Age of Sigmar like you can a game of 40K.
No, you can't.
You just can't because it's like, you can be like, oh, well, this, and this might happen. Probably, yeah, but then what if I win I don't know. And then it just like, what if, like I've seen people try and have been failed miserably.
No,
so I would say AOS is in an awkward spot. And I will see what happens this summer. I'm going to assume some sort of streamlining is going to occur, whatever it is, and there'll be a big push and some sort of new launch box, which I'm sure will have Stormcast in it. Although I would be fine if it didn't. But yeah, the game's in its end cycle of its current edition. So I don't know. We'll see. I didn't hate third. I generally enjoyed thirds. Like some of the things they did, I liked a lot.
I think you have this weird sort of like dichotomy between like the stuff they're releasing and the game, right? Like, because like I think the third edition was like a home run for releases because like
Yeah, that's true.
you had like beautiful armies come out. Like the Slaves to Darkness was a home run. The Seraphon release was a just unbelievable release.
Yep.
Cities of Sigmar was pretty good, like in terms of sales. So you had a lot of like really cool. They kind of updated a couple of the older armies, like Sylvaneth got some stuff. Orcs got like a nice little bit of a love. So a lot of really positive things from models and armies.
Yeah.
But then like on the gameplay side, I think that they have a lot of improvements that they probably could make.
Yeah, things got a little too. I don't know how to describe it. It's like if I had to pick one thing, it had to do with it's like too easy to negate bonuses. Like because there's like you could like trigger a +1 somewhere, and then someone can immediately take it away or +1 their defense. So it basically makes it irrelevant. So there was like they went a little too. It was weird. They like reduced the number. No, they increased the number of command points.
Yep.
That you would get, and then the knock-on effect is you could just willy-nilly turn on and off these buffs and debuffs, and so then the stat profile that you come with when you look at a data sheet, it doesn't matter because you're like. So anyway, I would like them to go back to a world where your data sheet is still the primary thing, and then that you're building off of, and then maybe there's a few little things in here and there.
A couple less levers, maybe.
But yeah, there's too many levers.
There's too many levers and too many times that you can pull the levers, and I think that just kind of, as much as I said, as it makes a really interesting deep game, it also slows things down to a crawl and makes it And I think if you love and care about a game, I think you always have to think about what the experience might be like for a new person, because ultimately that's going to determine whether the game is like sticks around long term. Right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, like every game has an attrition level. You probably, if you've been in any hobby for a long time, you've noticed this, that like your friends have dropped out. You go to a local event every year, like we go to Adepticon. There's people that I met the first Adepticon I went to like 8 years ago that no longer play AOS. Like I'm one of the only other guys I think like that I met at that original tournament. They're still playing every year.
There's some of those.
There's a couple guys,
There's a few,
but there's definitely a few I know that like they've moved on to other games or they don't even go at all anymore.
But I think
it just happens, right?
Yeah. But there's also new people,
of course.
I'm trying to remember I think they've settled in. They still average a couple hundred players.
I think it was like 250, 300 or something like that for the singles tournament, which is still a great impressive number. So.
So then we can move on to maybe rapid fire it a little bit.
So I would say the next tier of games is probably like Age of Darkness.
Yeah, I was going to say the specialist games, basically.
Yeah. So you tier down to Age of Darkness. I think Age of Darkness occupies its own tier.
It's like a number 3, yeah.
Yeah, like it's a number 3 behind the main two.
So definitely.
Age of Darkness is interesting. I've always found that because there's almost like this like so 40K has its own gravitational pull. It's just a force.
Yeah.
And it's almost like every Games Workshop hobbyist that you like, people, I'm not just defining people as like people who generally like the Games Workshop hobby, like they pop around and stuff. There's always this natural pull towards 40K, and that I think it just exists because the game is just played everywhere. It's so dominant in the culture. It's always going to be that way. Yeah, exactly. It's only going to get worse, guys. So Heresy's always fighting that, right? So Heresy's strength is that I think it kind of appeals to like people that want a less transient game.
Yeah.
People that want a more controlled like experience that stays similar throughout the years. People that are a lot of the time more veteran hobbyists, to be honest. Like people that have been doing it a lot longer.
It's a much slower pace.
It's a slower pace. The releases are slower. And the funny thing about that, though, I find, and I don't know how you feel, I'll let you comment on it, is it feels like a game that is very release dependent, though.
Yeah. It's now that the initial, or whatever, the first 6 months was an avalanche, and it was like this like euphoric, wonderful. Every week was something. Another thing came out, and guys were going nuts. We had like a dozen people just. Yeah, like I've never
frothing basically.
And we were selling quantities of things, like common things that I didn't like.
Yeah, I never thought that was possible.
Like 30 Sakaran tanks.
These are kits we never dreamed of having in plastic. So I think there was a bit of that.
So after that is done, and people like bought and built their like first couple armies. It's funny. There's another game we've been selling for some years, Flames of War. It has kind of the same problem because it is a historical game. It's a fictional historical game.
Yeah.
it's kind of like once you own those rhinos and leviathans and predators, there's like no reason to buy them again. I mean, maybe you're hardcore and you're like, oh, I bought a second army and I want to have its own models with its own color scheme. But generally speaking, you're reusing everything as much as you want, and then you add in this time around the 3D printer revolution. So people were already printing some things that weren't released yet. So it's definitely slowed down. Like this. I mean, Solar Auxilia is unique enough; it'll do fine. But you know, if they just release another variant of a Space Marine tank, it's like people are going to be like, like it's not as gasoline fire as it was. So, and then even new campaign books and things, they sell okay. It's kind of most of the HH guys kind of just. It's more events and leagues and tournaments, and then they buy the odd thing.
It's and I think that's fine. It's settling into what it is, right? And I think it's just going to be like a slower pace, small side game. Like it's already in that tier where like a lot of hobby shops won't even carry it at all.
Yeah.
And I think if it's going to do, like, it is one of those games where it can do really well or really poorly, depending on the people that are driving it in that particular region, right? So if you have really passionate people that are running events for it, and it can be just a great, huge product. It can almost seem like it's big as like 40K at some points, but it won't have its own magnetism. Like it's not going to.
I think its ultimate role long term is the player exiting 40K because it's too fast paced. Will want to play Heresy. Hopefully they're also a Marine player, which is I'm sure lots of them. If you're a pure Xenos player, you may not.
You know what's funny about that?
You might. I don't know.
It's kind of fun. I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, the funny thing about, because I think it was designed originally for that purpose. Because like sticking with an old rule set and stuff like
is
that.
The retirement home for that.
But imagine going forward, people that started with like 8th, 9th, or 10th edition.
Yes.
Graduated and being like, oh, Heresy, I want to paint some Space Marines. But that's a brand new rule set for them because like they didn't play 3rd through 7th or whatever, right?
Yes,
so that's kind of interesting too. You're like, they'll be like, what is this? Armor values?
It is totally weird and different. Yeah. But it's still, I would say, like you said, behind.
I think they've got like 4 to 5 more years of like easy wins. I think because you have like obviously this year the Solar Auxilia, they can just kind of like bleed that out through the year. You've got, if you did like over the next maybe 3 years after that, you've got Custodes. You could do like a pretty big thing for them. You've got the Mechanicum, and then you've got the Dark Mechanicum. Those are like 3 very easy things you could add. And then you've got like the extra Marine stuff. I think after that, that's when things get, I think, a little more difficult. And like you said, like that's where like a Bolt Action or Flames of War becomes a bit more of an interesting comparison. Is like, what do you do when you've released all the kits you wanted to put out for a historical game?
How do you go back? You can't make another Deimos Rhino or whatever. It's just, I mean, Games Workshop has a somewhat luxury of they can still technically invent things and just append them to the canon or whatever. This STC has this in it or whatever, and we'll just add it in.
But I think if you're ever wondering why that you like maybe you see one Heresy kit every 3 months,
right.
That's why, because they know it's a finite resource, they will probably take their time with it.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah, of course.
So what do we want to hit up next? I think you can go down to the next tier. I think I'm gonna put Old World and Lord of the Rings here. I think
sure
the next tier down.
Sure, yeah. So these are like games, I guess, that used to be big. And now have their like little community and have had like redos and refreshes. I mean, Lord of the Rings is a little different, I would say. But Old World, only because Old World is a wait and see still right now. But they have a lot of parallels. I think you're right. They kind of have like, they're going to have their small dedicated communities. I feel like the Old World guys will take what the Lord of the Rings guys, this is all based on like what goes on in Southern Ontario. Like the Lord of the Rings players have like, they're very organized. They run small tournaments throughout the year and a few larger ones, and they nibble on a few releases here and there, and a lot of it they have to do is make do with kind of the secondary market or some Forge World bits, or like there's not a lot of like stuff for stores to necessarily carry and sell them, so the revenue has to come from like organized play and small things like that. And I think now the Old World has the advantage of it will get some new things, and there's still another couple of years of releases. I think Games Workshop has invested a bit more money recently I think Lord of the Rings was a big investment up front, and then they haven't invested much since. And now it's
in its maintenance phase essentially.
yeah.
Right? Like
Whereas Old World, it's an interesting thing because they're like retooling old molds and releasing a hero or two, and we'll see. I think Old World will be more interesting in its second edition, if they do that.
Old World has the potential, I think, to move up a tier and join Heresy.
Yes,
as like a B game, if you want to say it that way.
It has enough players. Yeah.
But that largely, in my opinion, has a lot to do with like their product offerings.
Yeah.
Because it has to take up more of a space on the shelf. It has to have more new kits come out.
It has to have some way.
More current releases, right? So that'll be an interesting kind of thing to follow. But I think those two games, there's really not like they don't need to do that well to exist. Like I think that's the other thing too. That's the nice thing about being in that like C tier, if you want to say, of games is just little sales here and there, and a hobby shop will carry like a couple things, and you're pretty okay with that. Like that's a pretty good return, and you have a few customers that you keep happy. We have like maybe 6 to 8 guys that are interested in Old World at the shop, and when new releases come out, they just they get what they need, and it's good. Like,
yeah. So now it was early January, so what are we like? Almost 2 months out. It's like it's settling in here. Like I've got some players that are going to fire up a league in April, and in terms of sales, it's small ancillary things now. Like I've been trying to stock all the square bases, which people need. There's a few people that have been like myself that have written some lists and are trying to find model kits to fill in those gaps. But the main sales time has calmed down. There's not much, the made orders they've been doing lately are still Bretonnian and Tomb King based, and so there's some more residual sales there. So really, we need to get into the next phase and see what happens when, I guess, orcs and so on get released. And what
the big question too is like how many new players are they going to convert, right? Because like a lot of people are on the fence. Like I've talked to a lot of people that picked up maybe a rule book or like a forces book, and they're kind of just waiting. I think I put myself in this category.
The new player question is mostly to do with are they willing to wait?
Yeah,
because it's a waiting game. The veterans are fine. They're like they went back in. They just like dusted off their old uniform, put it back on, and they're back in the game, right?
That's right.
But if you didn't have one and you try and go to the store and get one, there isn't one to buy it. So that's really the tricky thing is now might be okay because it is wargaming and people seem to be okay with that. Like once the marketing machine comes on and the hype, like obviously like the long saga that Old World was, like you would have thought that it would have lost steam like 100 times, but it didn't. So yeah, I think Games Workshop is like okay with that. They're like, it's fine. There can be a break. Even Heresy 2.0, like there was like a 2-3 year break before it came back massively. So I didn't think it would. I didn't think our friend group would jump in as hard as we did again, but we did. So anyway, that's kind of where that's at right now for those. So.
And then I think you can kind of put every other game kind of like on a similar kind of not I don't want to say bottom tier because like it's not a negative association.
Not a tiers thing.
It's more about where it kind of sits in terms of like shelf space, sales revenue, and then player interest. I guess is like sort of the. So you're getting into like the war cries, kill teams, which I'd probably put at the top of that. Yeah. And then you've got like the Underworlds, you've got Blood Bowl. You've got like the remnants of Titanicus. You've got little bits and bobs of Necromunda, of course. Yeah,
sure,
of course. Which,
yeah. They get their little release here and there, and but yeah, those ones will have footprints in stores big because of their who's like the community there, like the hobby champion that's running that thing, or the store owner that really is into it. Without those games just kind of like, and that's probably a reason why most Games Workshops don't even have them on the shelf. They don't have the space for it, and it's not. They can be like, you could web order this, play it at home, So. It's
interesting to see, like I think the evolution of Warcry, where they went from making like basically trying to make their own game. Yeah, like it was it's just cool chaos things fighting each other. Yeah. And seeing them transition to like, I think they're basically like following the success of Kill Team.
Yes,
and they're like, look. Yeah. Let's not be stupid here. Like people want cool units for their armies that exist already. Yeah. Let's give them that. And since they've been doing that, I think they've been doing a lot better with Warcry.
Yes.
Blood Bowl is like its own thing. Like I don't worry about Blood Bowl. It's just going to always exist. There's like people out there that just love it. Necromunda is interesting. Like it's done really well historically, but it's going to be interesting because they're kind of at the end of their idea cycle, if you want to say. Like they've done all the main gangs, they've done a few of the like extra gangs. There are a couple they can explore still, but they're really out there. They have like 3 distinct kind of like battle zones that they've explored. They've done all the vehicles for the main factions.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see like where do they go next to actually generate sales for the game, because we've talked about this before on this channel. Unfortunately, whether we like it or not, it's like we live in a very commodified world. When people aren't spending money or when things aren't coming out for something, people all of a sudden start to assume something's dead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then player base drops off, interest drops. That'll be kind of interesting. I don't really know what the answer is there, but
we'll see.
I'm sure they're racking their brains thinking something.
Yeah. So
the only game I really worry about is Underworlds, like actually sticking around for a long period of time. I don't think it's got much life left.
No, it's got a card game problem wrapped in other things. So I think, you know what's funny? If it was a 40K property, it might be okay. But
that's interesting. I hadn't thought about a 40K little card game.
I think if it was 40K property, it would have probably continued. But nothing wrong with fantasy. But fantasy versus sci-fi these days is kind of not the same, unfortunately. But anyway, I think we'll wrap it up for this one.
Nobody listened to that end part anyway. We're gonna be like Underworld's rip or whatever.
Yeah,
people are gonna be like, what? What are you talking about? We don't watch the end of the video.
No, they don't. Yeah.
Well, hopefully you liked this little market update. If you liked it, let us know, and we'll maybe try to do it like a couple times a year.
Cover some other.
Yeah, and how like, are we wrong, or like what's your area like? Have you noticed that these trends are different? Let us know in the comments below. If you like these videos, please subscribe. It helps us out a lot. And if you'd like us even more, you can check out our Patreon and support us financially. Until next time, take care, guys.
Thanks. Bye.